Welcome to Lutheran Living in South Carolina, a video magazine for members of the South Carolina Synod. In this edition, we will hear about a new program to support rostered leaders as they grow in leadership, an invitation to this year's Synod Assembly, and much more.
This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Hi, I am Pastor Rick Carter, Assistant to Bishop Abishur, here in the wonderful state and Synod of South Carolina. I have the privilege of serving in the areas of candidacy and leadership. All that to say, I strive to listen to our rostered ministers and accompany them in finding the right resources that support them in becoming the most effective leaders within their ministry context. I'm here to share a story with you today. In 2022, the South Carolina Synod invited rostered ministers with 10 years or less within a ministry setting to join as a cohort with colleagues and discover the benefits of becoming effective leaders. I do want to say thank you to all the congregations of South Carolina, because this ministry cohort on developing effective leaders was made possible in part by your support, your mission support dollars that come in each and every month to the South Carolina Synod. We are grateful to walk in partnership with you in all aspects of your ministry. Thank you. What is leadership? Leadership is the ability of an individual to lead, influence, or guide other individuals or even entire organizations to accomplish those things that they otherwise would not even consider. And what are the characteristics of a good leader? Well, there must be great communication, growth mindset, vision, accountability and responsibility, humility, empowerment, focus. A discovery. Leadership begins with the leader. How can we begin to lead others if we cannot lead ourselves? Deacon Sarah Bowers and I spent several months exploring resources that we believed would provide a starting point for leadership development. The resource, Living Forward, a process where each leader begins the journey by creating a life plan. What is a life plan? A life plan could be seen as an app for your life. The title is pretty self-explanatory and seems to just make sense even if you've not really considered it before. The main objective of the life plan is to create a structure and direction in your professional and personal life. It helps you to identify what matters most to you. So why a life plan? I love how the authors of the book Living Forward use the image of a rip current. If you have never been caught in one, I feel certain that you have heard others tell the story of fighting to get out of the rip current. Once in the rip current, no matter how hard you swim to get back into shore, the current continues to take you out farther. It becomes exhausting, and unfortunately, it can also become deadly. In leadership roles, the rip current can be very strong. You can have ideals of how to get to where you are wanting to go, but if you are not intentional about what is most important, you find that eventually you're fighting against the self, and it becomes very exhausting. The authors of the book call it drifting. It happens when we're unaware. It happens when we're distracted. It happens when we are overwhelmed. It happens when we are deceived. And the consequences of drifting, well, there's confusion. It can be expensive. There's lost opportunity, pain, and even regrets. A life plan gives us a map, a compass heading for what matters most, both professionally and personally. A life plan is a short written document, usually 8 to 15 pages long. It is created by you for you. It articulates your personal priorities. It provides the specific actions necessary to take you from where you are to where you want to be in every major area of your life. It is most of all a living document that evolves as necessary for the rest of your life. Now I want to clarify something very important. The life plan is not a fix for the work-life balance. In fact, life balance is a myth. What we learn as effective leaders is how to manage those areas of our lives that are most important. In fact, the authors have identified 6 benefits of pursuing and creating a life plan. 1, clarifying your priorities. 2, maintaining balance. 3, filtering opportunities. 4, facing reality. 5, envisioning the future. 6, avoiding regrets. So what did we discover during the past 12 months? We discovered that leaders felt supported, resourced, and empowered to lead effectively within their current ministry context, simply by creating a life plan. An unexpected outcome? One leader has introduced this process to their council and is now leading them to experience the benefits identified by Hyatt and Harkavy. Lastly, it was very interesting as we went through this together to begin drawing parallels with the teachings of Jesus to his disciples. If you would like to learn more, or maybe you would like to participate in the cohort, please contact me or Deacon Sarah Bowers. We would love to share this leadership resource with you. Thank you so much, and make it a great day in the Lord.
The disciples turned to one another in shock. Were not our hearts burning within us? He was right there, and we didn't even recognize him. How could we be so blind? How often are we in settings and situations where something is clouding our ability to see Christ in our neighbor? We so often are just like the disciples, looking back and thinking, how could we have missed that? Sometimes we all just need a little reminder. Well, maybe we've got the perfect one for a time and a season such as this. We are excited to invite you to our 2023 South Carolina Synod Assembly this summer at the Columbia Marriott, June 8th through 10th, under the theme, I See Jesus. Throughout the assembly, we will be hearing stories from across our Synod and Synodical partners about where God is at work and where we see Jesus in those around us. Within the assembly theme, there will be 4 lenses through which we reflect, I see Jesus, in unexpected places, in those that look, talk, act, and believe differently than me, in our spaces, and in our community. All those gathered will be inspired and encouraged to dig deep and reflect on where we see Jesus in our congregations, in both the likely and unlikely spaces. Come and be renewed and reminded that we are all created in God's image, and all those we meet are God's children as well. Come and see and experience God at work in the ministry, your ministry, our ministry, the ministry of the South Carolina Synod.
In Luke, Jesus tells us the greatest commandment is you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. It's an important question in our calling as Christians, as well as in our outreach efforts. What does it mean to be a neighbor? If your church is wrestling with this question, or isn't but it should be, there are a few simple steps that you can start with. First, define who you're talking about when you talk about your neighbors. I see many churches ending up generalizing what it means to be a neighbor, but if we try to be a neighbor to everybody, then we end up being a neighbor to nobody. Now, this isn't to exclude. You can always go back and change your definitions later, but it's better if you're starting with something specific. Once you've defined your neighbors, you have to learn their names. Talk to them. Care. Get to know them. In our call to love our neighbors as ourselves, it's hard to do that if we don't know who they are and even just a little bit about them. Reaching out in love is different when it is a neighbor whose name and needs you know. In all of this, be genuine. Being a good neighbor is done for the purposes of being a good neighbor and building relationship. If the only purpose of loving your neighbor is to get a person to come to your church, that ulterior motive will bubble to the surface and damage the relationship when it does. You can love because you're a Christian, and you can love because it's what we're called to do, but it is not followed up with the condition, if and only if, they'll come to worship in my congregation. So if this has been helpful and you're looking for more, I suggest you check out the book, The Art of Neighboring. It covers all of what I've talked about in more detail and has great discussion questions at the end for a church or a group who wants to wrestle with this. It's been very helpful for me, and I believe it can be helpful for your congregation as well. So if this is something your church would like to talk through or would like some more conversation with, just reach out at my Synod email and I'm happy to help you think through what outreach might look like in your context.
Hello, I'm Pastor Emily Edenfield, and I'm an assistant to the bishop in the ELCA South Carolina Synod. This is Lutheran Frequently Asked Questions, or FAQ, and today's FAQ is, what is Lent? Here's the short version. Lent is the church calendar season before Easter. It lasts for 40 days, not counting Sundays, and it prepares us to hear the story of Jesus' death and resurrection by calling us to renew our faith practices. In many churches, we kick off Lent with worship on Ash Wednesday. Sometimes we'll get together the night before and eat pancakes too. So let's talk about the calendar. The season of Lent lasts for 40 days because 40 is a symbolic number in the Bible. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness fasting and praying, then being tempted by the devil as he began his earthly ministry. The people of Israel spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness after God brought them out of slavery in Egypt. Noah and his family endured 40 days and nights of rain on the ark back in Genesis. You get the picture. So we do 40 days of Lent, except that we don't count Sundays. Why not Sundays, you might ask? Well, since the earliest days of the church, before there was an official calendar and all that, Christians have worshipped on Sunday because Jesus rose from the dead on Sunday. Every Sunday is a little Easter, and we can't have Lent on Easter, so we skip the Sundays. This can also mean that if you gave something up for Lent, you can have it on Sunday, but you and Jesus can talk that one through on your own. And why do we call this season Lent anyway? The word comes from an Old English word meaning to lengthen. In the Northern Hemisphere, Lent falls during springtime. The days are lengthening. The daylight is lengthening during this season of Lent. Easter, the day when we remember Jesus' resurrection, falls on a different day each year. Officially, it is the first Sunday after the full moon that occurs on or after the spring equinox. You don't have to remember that. What it means, though, is that Lent can start anywhere from February 4th to March 10th. We gather for worship on Ash Wednesday, the first day of Lent, and mark our foreheads with ashes as a sign of our repentance and our mortality. During this season, which usually features purple colors in the worship spaces, we focus on discipleship. We talk about what it means to follow Jesus and how we can do that as well as we can. Traditionally, there are 3 practices for Lent: fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. All of them help us to grow in faith. Fasting means to give something up for a time. Some people will give up food 1 day a week. Some give up social media or shopping, another activity, or a favorite food. But here's the trick. When we have cravings, that is our cue to pray. You're fasting from lunch and your stomach growls? Time to pray for someone who's skipping lunch today because they can't afford it, or some other situation that's on your heart. The point of fasting is to remind us that we can give up anything, because ultimately we are only dependent on God. Fasting also connects us to that Tuesday before Ash Wednesday tradition that I mentioned before. You might have heard this day called Shrove Tuesday, Fat Tuesday or Mardi Gras, which just means Fat Tuesday in French. The point of Fat Tuesday was to use up all the food in the house so that it wasn't there to tempt anyone while you were supposed to be fasting. Pancakes use up dairy and eggs, and they go well with bacon or sausage, so they became staples of the feast. You might also see fried foods or cakes or other delicacies on the menu. The second traditional Lenten discipline is prayer. Prayer is simply talking with God. If you're looking to spend more time with Jesus, you might commit to Wednesday night worship at a congregation, praying for 5 or 10 minutes every morning, or having devotions before bed at night. Reading the Bible is another great way to pray as we listen to what God is saying. Lent can be an excellent time to read through a book or a section of the Bible. This gets even better, of course, when we team up with friends, family, or church family to pray and listen together. The third traditional Lenten practice is almsgiving. We don't usually use the word alms anymore, but we do know what it is to share. So maybe for you this looks like an extra donation to your congregation or a cause that means a lot to you. Maybe this looks like random acts of kindness. Whether it's money or time, compliments or friendship bracelets, everyone has something they can give. God has given each of us a way to share with the world. Whether you fast from something, make extra space for prayer, or find a way to give this Lent, or you do all three, I hope that this season will be a time where the Holy Spirit draws you closer to God. We spend this time in the church getting ourselves ready for the terrible lows of Holy Week and the great joy of Jesus' resurrection on Easter morning. We might think of it as a time when we spring clean our souls. Lent is another chance for us to declutter, to put down the sins and habits that take us away from God, to make room for God's Spirit to work in us. As the flowers break through the cold ground in this springtime season, may God's love flower and bloom in your soul and in your community of faith. Thanks for welcoming me into your conversation today. I hope you'll continue the discussion when you email me or comment below with your questions and insights. You can keep up with the other FAQ by subscribing to the South Carolina Synod YouTube channel as well. You'll also find a handout to continue your thoughts and discussion in the comments below. I look forward to being with you again soon. Until then, keep asking good questions and peace be with you.
Thank you for watching this edition of Lutheran Living in South Carolina. If you have any ministry stories or helpful resources, please leave them in the comments below. I'm always looking to learn and share. Thank you, and peace be with you.